Namaskar. Welcome to this special edition of Wide Angle with Ashok Vyas, and I'm delighted to be joined by Professor Sanjay Patel today. One thing which we have started losing gradually with smartphone is our reading habits, and how someone who has taught for the last 22 years, yes, and that too subject which is directly related to reading habits literature. Professor Sanjay Patel joins us today. Welcome, Sanjay ji. Namaste.
Namaste.
So, first of all, I want to thank you once again for being able to participate with us. And let us begin by your dream as a child. Was it in your to do list in life that I would become a professor?
Ever since I was in, I guess I could say early, around middle school, I've always been interested in becoming a professor. I wanted to go into medicine. Actually, the whole point was to train, be a professor in medicine, train other potential doctors to become doctors, and I wanted to make sure I stay in the field. So that's why I stayed in the field of being a professor. But now I do it in literature.
And let me also talk about the subject of your interest, so science to literature, how that shift came about.
um, I saw that literature encompasses all fields. Right? It's more philosophical. And because of that, I was given an opportunity to explore science, history, psychology, as well as literature. And this way, I can actually use all of these mediums for my own interest. And I'm very curious about history. I'm always reading constantly, and also I wanted to impart proper guidance and knowledge to the youth today, since we're seeing more and more in education changes that are occurring, in which the Common Core has shifted away from more in-depth learning. So this is something that I found fascinating, and I wanted to. That's what inspired me to go into education.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's look at the role which literature plays in our lives. Many times people feel that whatever you read is to get a good job, or what is the utility. And so consciously or unconsciously, people, those who don't love literature, they put literature aside. So I remember a conversation which my daughter had with someone telling her that if you want to pay your bills, forget about being a writer.
Hmm.
You may or may not succeed. Better focus on becoming a doctor. So you, so talk to me about not just this conversation, but in general, is our society paying less and less importance to literature?
Yeah, I agree with you. What I'm seeing is that we are taking education for its utility, as you had mentioned. We're looking at education for what it can compensate for our youth, our children in the future. But there should be a balance between the intrinsic aspect of education, which we learn for the sake of knowledge to improve ourselves, our character, our dignity, right, as human beings. At the same time, literature should teach us, of course. I mean, not literature. Education also teaches us the practical side of sustaining our livelihood by making a proper earning as well. But we've lost that balance. It's shifted to one side, and it's become just earning money. So every time we study, it seems that everyone is studying to see the outcome, the outcome of financial gains, rather than also gaining knowledge. So the curiosity of these young children as they grow older becomes stifled, and because of that, we're seeing less interest in reading, as we had mentioned.
So now let us look at the magic spell which we most of us have experienced, that books cast on us. And sometimes you probably would remember days when you were so much glued to a book that you couldn't sleep, or constantly, day in day out, you had that book with you wherever you were going because you wanted to go through those pages. If you recollect that kind of experience in your life, what book was that? And I may also add different genres of writing that we have, fiction, non-fiction would be two major difference. What was your interest? And when I think about literature, I don't consider non-fiction that kind of literature as I consider fiction or poetry and those kind of essays, etc., as a part of literature.
Of course. For me, I guess being young, when we're young, we always fascinate young, especially young boys. They're fascinated by science. So reading nonfiction was a big, it was very pivotal in my life at a young age. But as I grew older, when we started reading novels in middle school and high school, these stories particularly fascinated me, that to see the different dimensions of human beings, different motivations, their agendas in life, helped me understand human behavior, the psychology of human beings, the sociology, sociological structures. Particularly books, I was fascinated by Shakespeare in particular, because he's a master. He's a master of human psychology, human behavior. He shows how in times of plenty that, the struggles man faces. Unfortunately, Shakespeare does show that the individual collapses. But at the same time, I also used Eastern literature, okay, which actually helped me to create a balance between two different perspectives. And for me, from the Eastern literature, the Bhagavad Gita played a huge role in understanding a
Okay,
deeper.
so since you brought it up, allow me to sort of interject and seek your take on just an obvious comparison. When you talked about Shakespeare, I was reminded of some of the famous lines of Shakespeare. One being "to be or not to be," that is the question, right?
Right.
And if you look at Bhagavad Gita, to be in the battlefield or not to be there, that is the question actually. So
Yes.
somewhere there is similarity, but the treatment, of course, is different. And since you have sort of given more thoughts to it, share your comparison in terms of the treatment, in terms of that, as you said, he's a master of human psychology or human mind, and we consider Yogeshwar helping Arjuna layer by layer come to the realization of truth. So share your take on this
Oh,
comparison.
absolutely. Um, as we can see, there's two dichotomies almost on extreme sides. Even though both Krishna, Yogeshwar Krishna has understood human psychology, human behavior, we see Shakespeare also explore it in different aspects from his tragedies, from his comedies. The difference I saw is that the two authors, Shakespeare, his endings were tragic, whereas Krishna's ending was always sublime. He always found a way for his characters, or his friends in Mahabharata, right? In the Gita, sorry, to uplift and come out of predicament situations, to rise outside of the struggles of life and come out with victorious, right? So the struggle between, like as you had mentioned, to be on the battlefield or not, the idea of giving the outlook that my duty is very essential, different levels of duty, personal duty, societal duty, universal duty, which we get from Gita. Where Shakespeare, I see that there's a limitation, right? It doesn't involve certain aspects of what we call dharma. I don't want to use the word religion for dharma, but it could have used it, and if he had used it, maybe his characters would have been different. Maybe Hamlet needed someone like Krishna to guide him.
So now I must also admit that we cannot compare the two the way we did it, but since we look at epic as a form of literature, so Mahabharata comes into that category. But in general, in India as well as in the Western writers, if you are subscribing to a particular pathway uh, towards truth, then they think that you are not as pure a writer as you should be. I might not be using exact words, but the general idea is that your literature becomes the torch bearer for you to arrive at your truth, which is free from the accepted way of arriving at truth. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
So from that point of view, probably when Shakespeare, or for that matter any author who portrays more conflicts without being able to give the kind of resolution that would leave you on an uplifted plane, probably they feel that this is what they are supposed to do. So now, if I put one simple question, what is the objective of literature, in your opinion?
Okay. I really firmly believe that literature should give human beings directions and guidance and actually help them shape their goals. Right? One of the things is that other than imparting just knowledge, but the key is that we all need to have goals, and through literature we will also get history. We need to have a little sense of history so that we learn from the mistakes and the successes, and we can find the right path for us. Literature can also give us a sense of inner pleasure as we read different forms of poetry, or we read different lines, like when like Shakespeare says, "To thine own self be true." When we think about that, how important it is to know ourselves, right? So literature actually should be very inspirational to transform society in a positive direction. What I've seen from the literature that I've taught in high school and I've taught in college, many of the modern day literature, uh, it's more about a sense of narcissism, where the individual is indicating the problems they're facing in life, and it is good that they show the problems. But I believe that for the youth, when they read it, if they don't have in that literature a solution to the problems, then what happens is that the youth also becomes stuck at one point, and we want them to grow, and we want them to find roads out of the situations. But literature should be inspiration to help us grow as human beings, society as a whole as well.
Absolutely. Inspiration to grow from literature is very much needed, but that would come only if you go near the literature. And we see that is declining day by day. And what has been your observation? And do you see that as a problem? Because people feel that if I'm getting my information from my social media feeds,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
if I'm texting, that is also writing. I mean, you hear those kind of arguments from kids these days. Your impressions and views.
Sure. What I've read in many of the newspapers is that today we seem to be reading more, but the reading we're doing is actually from the texting, short messages, blogs. Though, if we consider that to be reading, then what happens that's not structured reading. That's not a reading with a vision, and reading should create also an outlook. Literature should create an outlook for us, and a positive outlook in life. And these type of reading actually is more conversational based. And what is happening is that I think if to have the youth to read, it has to come from childhood, with a lot of motivation from parents. The more the parents actually read at home as well, and then the children will also follow. We all know that children are very impressionable. So whatever happens at home, is the parents are the first defense for everything that happens.
So literature helps us in growing, but we now are more prone towards looking at entertainment in everything.
Yes.
And if it is not interesting, then we would say bye bye. So I don't want to take away the importance of being able to sustain readers' interest. So there has to be a fine balance in what you aspire to share, whether through a fictional book or non-fictional book, and yet being able to retain readers with you as you move along. And since you are a professor of literature, so if we use a term, content and style, uh, so do you think there has been a change in the style of the modern and contemporary novelist as compared to the classics? One which you earlier off the camera were mentioning was mentioning is your favorite by Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. So those days and now.
Um, we're, the classical literature, what I've observed, and I've been to seminars with at the university level as well. We see that they explore humanity from a sociological perspective, from an individual perspective, and they try to show perhaps a vision of the future as well, and perhaps a historical problem that occurred in time. The literature I'm seeing today in our contemporary times within the past maybe 10, 15, 20 years, it seems to be more based on sociological problems of individuals, perhaps from ethnicity, racial issues, gender issues.
So there's another thing. I don't know whether you are aware and whether it exists in English the same way, but in India, like you have classification of literature based on the issues that they are raising.
Mm-hmm.
So there would be a Dalit site, there is a Mahila site, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Though there would be novel in that category also, there would be poems in that category also. But do you see this labeling of literature is, I mean, how do you see see this labeling? Uh, I mean, and there are some PhDs written also on keeping literature of so coming from India, the pre-independence literature, there would be some studies done on that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I do see there's a leveling in the novels that are being written today. They're showing obviously the contemporary problems that are transpiring, all of particularly whatever region they are writing from, and these are all, from my perspective, what I've seen is that they're all good for that time period, and if they can include slightly more thinking process in there, if they can include more perhaps understanding of philosophers' thought process as well. And look at from psychologist perspective as well, I believe that the literature can be transcended. So today's literature is, we do want to appeal to the audience, but then it becomes entertainment.
Absolutely. So there has to be a fine balance between entertainment as well as what you want to convey. But in order to be able to convey, you should have a proper process of thinking, of assimilating other writings, or
Yes.
some compelling reasons to write. And let me take the liberty of looking at the role which market force play on writing skills, because there are huge sums paid as advance by publishers to some writers who have actually no recognition as an author, but they are known as a politician. But now, because they are in the news, so publisher know that there'll be a sellability if this
Mm-hmm.
name goes with the book. How do you see this working for genuine genuine writers? He may not get that kind of attention.
Right. Yeah. To me, this seems to be a very harsh conflict between, for those who are aspiring to actually propound ideas. Okay, someone who wants to actually explore the human condition and to give it to others, and they're in conflict with the popular writers, the politicians, the sports writers, right, media writers, and it seems that these particular writers, the popular writers, they get the attention, and the others become more academic, right? So they're read in schools, they're read in colleges, and sometimes the political ones also, or the popular ones, are also read in colleges. But unfortunately, the clash is there, and I remember, I recall that one of the authors that I have found so enlightening, he wrote the book Denial of Death. His name is Becker, and he said that there's too much print. so much print that you cannot sustain it in your mind. It's not possible. That there has to be a balance between publishers who actually accept anything to print because it's written by someone famous just to make money. That idea of capitalism in publications also has to be dealt with in some form.
So we will leave that for some other folks to deal. But being aware also helps somewhere. I believe that, and awareness that there is decline in reading habits among students must have given you some additional creative pressure to think about how to engage them and how to inculcate interest in books. And if you care to share that idea, how it plays in your mind and in your class, and any example of your impression about um kids taking interest in some books that are being taught to them.
The key, I think, to inspiring children to read is to find literature that they can personally connect with. We always say person to person connection, person to self connection, person to world connection, person to maybe history connection. But the first stage has to be person. The reader has to connect whatever he reads in there to himself. And once they can do that, then the process of reading grows, because once they see that the characters that they're reading, the conflicts that they're seeing, the setting that they're seeing, actually they have very similar situations, the reading actually grows and their curiosity grows, and they actually want to finish reading what they're actually started.
So, any book which you think is popular among youth these days, whether it is a part of the course or in general?
Uh, uh, a lot of these students today, they seem to like fiction that are actually not just for United States, not just American, but I've seen a lot of students like to read foreign writers, because it's a curiosity about how other people live in their life, how the other people live in other countries, and it seems to it seems to grasp in some level their interest. I also seen students also like to read literature, and as I've been teaching over the years, literature that deals with thinking that goes beyond the mundane. What I mean is that daily life. They also like to read something that's going to inspire them to think about what is their purpose in their life, what is the meaning in their life, because they're always looking for answers about who they are, what they are, where they came from.
So, I think this is a very interesting conversation, and we're just moving towards the concluding part of our conversation. So, sensibility, human sensibility is important. And as you said, if they can identify, if they can connect, or if they can gather something which would help them in finding their way to move forward. Now, there is cultural sensibility with some specific color to it. And there is a human sensibility. Do you see that is visible in or that can be pointed in the literature? For example, if this author comes from with Indian background, or this author is with Indian American roots, or this author grew up in America, is there some recognizable difference in writer sensibility as per your observation or views?
For the writers that I've seen, in the contemporary writers who are from different countries, I've seen a globalization in writing. And the sensibility that you're referring to is that they seem to find some way of trying to connect their personal observations or their personal insights of the world, maybe through even the characters they have, is actually a reflection of their own lives. And what they do is that they try to show where society is moving at the current times. And in that sense, there is some sensibility, but I also feel that if they can go a little further outside of that, beyond that, it would be even a little bit more stronger, because the reader, the youth reader, they always ask me when I remember in college, I'm trying to find out more. I'm trying to understand what is the purpose of life, what is the purpose of my life, especially that age group between 16, 17, 18, 19.
So I think I'm very, very encouraged by what I heard from you, and this question of what is the purpose of my life? It is relevant for all age groups. If you have not figured out 100%, and I must admit that it is relevant for me also, and I see that from whichever source, and I try to assimilate and sort of make something of my own. And we will have more conversations with you. But today, as we leave, if there are some lines that have stuck with you for whatever reason, maybe some poem, or sometimes we used to remember some dialogues from plays, anything that you may care to share.
Sure. One particular line is that there is no situation, no adverse situation that can circumvent my will and my desire. No destiny can actually hamper my will, my desire to achieve what I wish, what I want, because I am the bridge maker.
Wow. So here's the bridge maker, Professor Sanjay Patel, making bridge of literature and connecting books to students with that invisible bridge which makes it meaningful. And we appreciate your, I would say, service for the community at large and for the humanity at large, because literature, I think, sustains us on some level of sanity. So I once again thank you very much with lots and lots of good wishes, Sanjay ji. Namaste.
Okay, namaste.
So as we thank Professor Sanjay Patel, I thank all of you for being a part of this enlightening conversation with lots and lots of good wishes. This is Ashok Vyas.